Welcome to Redundancy Matters with me, June Hogan. I'm a qualified career coach and an outplacement specialist with a background in HR. This is the podcast where I help HR professionals and leaders managing redundancies to put people at the heart of the process. This week, I'm joined by Stuart Betteridge, who is a line manager with 20 years' experience in IT services. And during that time, Stuart has had to lead many redundancy programmes. Stuart had been listening to Series 1 of my podcast and got in touch to ask if I'd like him to share his experience as a line manager. It was perfect timing as I was thinking about guests for Season 2. This is a conversation about what it feels like to be a line manager managing redundancies. Stuart brings a refreshingly honest perspective on his experience, from being put at risk himself to guiding teams through the process. Stuart shares practical realities and the emotions that come up with delivering difficult news, whilst also balancing compassion, compliance and leadership. So we explore what it feels like to be both at risk and leading others through it, why visibility and availability matter to those at risk and those who aren't affected, and the importance of the HR and manager relationship and how to make it work. I really hope you enjoy our conversation. And if you want to go deeper into managing redundancies, you'll find the link in the show notes to register for a free monthly lunch and learn session where my colleague Robin and I explore different aspects of managing redundancies. And there are also lots of resources on my website, wildwoodcoaching.co.uk, that can help you if you're managing redundancies. Okay, so let's dive into today's episode. Welcome to today's episode of Redundancy Matters, and I'm delighted to welcome Stuart Betteridge. Stuart is a line manager with lots of experience in line management and also managing redundancies. And Stuart is here today to share his experience from the line manager's perspective, and I'm really looking forward to the conversation together. So welcome, Stuart, and do you just want to introduce yourself to the listeners today?
Hi, June. Thank you ever so much for having me. I feel very privileged. So I started working in the IT industry a few years ago now, showing my age. But I started in the banking and the retail sectors. The large majority of my career has been working in the IT services industry. Back in 2001, I moved away from being a techie as such. I decided that I wanted to have a career in management. I was more suited for the people aspect rather than the technical aspect. And therefore, I've been a line manager now for over 20 years. Unfortunately, had the opportunity to work with some fantastic people and teams located all over the UK and in Europe at some parts in my career.
Oh, wonderful. And the podcast is called Redundancy Matters, and I like to ask all my guests, why does redundancy matter to you?
Yeah, well, when I became a manager, I was very much looking forward to all the nice things that's associated with being a manager, helping people to develop and encourage team members to grow in their roles and to work together and deliver the best services we could for our customers. And then there's the other part of being a manager, which involves team members exiting the organisation, sometimes for positive reasons, career progression, relocation, or retirement, most recently. But then there's the not so nice reasons, and one of these is redundancy, a process that involves employees who have done absolutely nothing wrong, being swept along in a process that's initiated well out of their control, can potentially have huge life-changing changes to them and their families. So I learned early on that redundancy happens. I can't change that. And my role and my commitment to the redundancy process and the situation is just to ensure that I contribute in a positive way and that my team have all the necessary support that they need from me.
It's such a life-changing event, and as you say, entering into management, and I know when I was early in my HR career, it wasn't something that I ever thought I'd have to do. And so doing that for the first time can be really quite difficult. So if you think back to when you had to do that for the first time, what were some of the challenges? What was going on for you as a line manager who had to deliver that news and manage that process?
Wow, that seems a lifetime ago now. I'd not been a manager for long when our customers informed us that they decided to offshore the whole of my service to another country. Been mentioned before, a lot of IT companies were exploring utilising low-cost global solutions. So itself, the idea kind of wasn't a shock, but the sudden realisation that my whole service and the 20 plus team that I got were all going to be losing their jobs was a huge shock. That included me as well. I was put at risk. As you can imagine, I didn't sleep very well at the time. I remember that.
Yeah.
And when I look back, I was really lucky to be able to work with a very experienced HR manager who kind of held my hand throughout the whole process. And I remember she sat me down in our canteen late afternoon, a couple of hours that we had, and she taught me through the different steps of the process, and we plotted the timeline and the key events that needed to happen. The announcement of the team, the at-risk letters being sent out, the one-to-one consultation meetings, all the way to the end of the process, which plotted everybody's last working day. So it was a horrible, and it impacted not just me, it impacted my family because I was at risk as well. But being able to kind of come home and bounce off my wife about the situation, yeah, it wasn't a great time.
Yeah. And that notion, lots of people will find themselves in this situation, leaders and also HR professionals. Not only are you supporting a team and leading that process, but you're also impacted. So just describe what that was like, taking yourself back to that time.
Yeah, I'd never been put at risk myself ever before. I'd heard of people being put at risk and redundancy process, but it was all just brand new. But I guess that kind of did come secondary to the fact that suddenly I've got 20 odd people who were looking at me for support. Some of them had never experienced redundancy before, and it was just all kind of unknown territory. I just remember we had a fantastic HR manager to work with who was very experienced and was able to put some clarity around it to explain what the steps would be. So, yeah, very thankful to her and her support at the time.
Yeah, yeah. And how did you manage those boundaries, I guess, between thinking about yourself and thinking about your team? Because I can imagine that must be really difficult.
Yeah, I think some people would probably suggest that it was a bit easier to come from a position where, well, I'm as impacted as everybody else. But that did feel quite secondary at the time, probably because I felt a huge responsibility to my team. And I'd worked as part of the team before I became a manager. So, some of these guys I'd worked with on quite a long kind of time, I considered a couple of them to be friends, so that was quite difficult. I think my personal situation, as we went through the process, we were quite fortunate to have quite a lengthy consultation process. Moving a service to another country isn't a quick thing that just happens overnight. We did have a lengthy process, and during that process, I was removed from being at risk because another opportunity came up in the company that I was able to apply for, and I was successful in that process. So I guess that element disappeared for me, but I still had the responsibility of helping and supporting the 20 plus team members through the process.
And when you look back, and as you say, because of the nature of the work that you're in, redundancy has been a bit of a theme in terms of customers changing requirements, offshoring, different things that have come up over the years. What would you say are some of the most challenging aspects of managing redundancies?
I think probably the introduction of a selection criteria into the process. So the first redundancy experience I had was the whole team were going. So there wasn't a requirement for selection criteria to determine who was staying and who was going. But it was required in the second process that I had to be part of. And yeah, that's very challenging when you know that a decision has to be made that people can stay, but you're effectively choosing who will be going. I mean, the whole thing about selection criteria is it's there to make sure that you have the skills and the experience that's required post the restructure. You kind of have to move yourself away emotionally from the process itself and just make sure that the people are rated fairly, consistently, so that when you deliver the news, you know that you're delivering the decision that hasn't just been rushed. It's been a very thought out decision making process. But having to deliver that news as part of that final consultation meeting was very, very difficult. And I remember the first meeting, and I probably will never forget it.
Yeah, yeah. And thinking about when you hear the news that redundancies are it's on the agenda again, what's on your mind as a line manager when you hear that news?
I personally go into practical mode, working on the logistics of ensuring that the announcement's delivered in the best possible way to everybody at the same time so that no one feels deemed to be not important. So it's always been very important to me that as best as possible, everybody gets the news at the same time. Moving on to scheduling the first one-to-one meetings, I've always managed members of a team that work shifts, so days, nights, weekends. So arranging meetings, etc., have always been very challenging. And the HR partner that I'm working with needs to be quite flexible. And we've delivered meetings at 6 o'clock in the morning. We've done them 9, 10 o'clock at night. just to fit in with people. They're the important people, and we'll do whatever we have. And it's never been an issue. Every HR partner I've always worked with has always been very flexible, and it's worked really well. Outside of scheduling the meetings, I'm probably thinking about how I can make myself available visual as much as possible. I mean, rescheduling some routine meetings, just so I'm around in case anybody's got any questions or queries. I don't want people to wait for their one-to-one meetings to think that, oh, I was going to ask Stuart a question or something like that. I want them to be able to know that they can ask me whatever they want and I'll give them the best answer I can. Or if they just want someone just to bounce off some ideas and worries that they may have.
And that notion of treating people, everyone's the same, everyone needs to hear the information as much
Mm,
as possible at the same time. The logistics of that can be quite challenging. And I remember going in on night shift to make those announcements as well. I think it really matters to people that they don't hear this stuff secondhand, which is harder and harder these days because of social media. When you talk there about really wanting people to know that you're available, I think that's so important because often people do think the only time they can talk to you is in those consultation meetings.
yeah,
And if you only
absolutely.
have, it's a leadership opportunity
Mm.
in managing redundancies.
Yeah, it certainly is. I mean, people, I guess, they experience their line managers through work matters normally. And then suddenly, we introduce something that's very personal for everybody. As a manager, as a leader, I think that's the time that you really need to show up and be visual. I've always said to say from the first moment I was put at risk, maybe really think about how you're personally impacted. So I've always gone into redundancy processes with the viewpoint of wanting to make sure that everybody's treated as I would want to have been treated in a process.
Yeah. And that there's the balance between compassion and compliance
Mm,
whenever you're dealing with
mm.
this kind of situation. And it really sounds to me that you put the emphasis on being compassionate and being there for people. What have you learnt over the years about that balance, if you like, between compliance and compassion?
It's an interesting challenge. I guess this is where your HR representative comes in. They can keep you compliant. So having someone that you could just ring up and say, look, I've been asked this question. I'm not sure how to approach the answer or should I answer it? And so again, working with some fantastic HR representatives that I have over the years has kind of helped me to understand how I can kind of walk that line and make sure that I can be there for emotional support as well as practical where possible, and refer people to HR outside of their consultation meetings if things can't wait until they have their next meeting.
Yeah, having that partnership approach, as you said at the start, when
Mm.
you're entering this, you're very much in partnership with your HR manager. But at the end of the day, you're the one delivering the news, standing behind those messaging. So when you reflect on the various meetings and processes that you've managed, what would you say people are looking to you for as a line manager? What do they need from you when they're in this vulnerable time?
I guess throughout the process, the line manager's the constant. So whilst the HR partner will be present during meetings and it will provide any additional support if needed, it's the line manager that the employees will see the most and interact with on a day-to-day basis as they carry on their duties and we deliver the service. Our working responsibilities to the service don't disappear just because we're going through a redundancy process. Work life has to carry on. We've still got services to deliver, but of course, individuals are experiencing all kinds of different emotions. So, as their line manager, I think it's important to ensure that I'm there for them and able to support them. They shouldn't have to wait to the meeting like we talked earlier, just make myself visual. I mean, I've seen individuals who have been struggling and I've asked them for come and have 10 minutes with me. Let me buy you a cup of coffee or something like that, just to create that space for them, just to talk through what it is that's worrying them at that particular moment in time. I think that's what they should be able to expect from their managers. The involvement that a manager has in the meeting is quite minimal. The HR element, the manager's role bookends the whole process with being able to deliver emotional support and work specific information that they need.
Yeah, and when you said that you're the constant, you're the
Mm,
person that they need to know they can go to throughout that process. And yes, you're managing business as usual in some situations. I mean, if it's a site closure, then there's still that to do, but maybe the priorities are slightly different. But making sure that you're noticing, and again, as a leader, as a manager, being close to your people. So you've said about the role of HR to kind of keep you compliant and answer those questions that maybe you don't have the immediate answers for, and just to check in with them. What else would you look for? I'm just thinking about people who might be listening, HR professionals. What do you need from a HR partner in this situation?
I'm sure you won't be surprised for me to say that the HR partner or representative is critical. and having someone fantastic to work with can make the process seem so much more human. So hopefully you get to work with the same HR manager or representative throughout the whole of the process. And that allows you to build up a way of working that you both get used to. So I guess there's that consistency that you know what to expect. And when I can say things in the meeting, the HR representative will allow me that space to be able to say things. So we learn from each other as we go through that process. I think at the start of a redundancy process, I think it's really useful. And I'd suggest to any HR representative just to take the time to talk through the timeline with the manager, what to expect from them. I think it's also useful to maybe share the meeting scripts in advance of the meetings themselves so the manager's fully aware of what's going to be said during the meeting. And also between the HR representative and the manager, maybe just to talk through some of those what will happen if scenarios. So, for example, the employee doesn't attend the meeting, the employee walks out the meeting or becomes distressed in the meeting. So, by just having that time to almost anticipate some scenarios that may or may not happen, just allows you to both be on the same page and respond appropriately in those kind of situations. That's something certainly that, there was a lot of emotion at the first redundancy process that I went through across the whole of the team. And we certainly experienced some of those scenarios. And it was useful having that experienced HR manager say, look, Stuart, if this happens, this is what I'm going to do and say, this is what I'd like you to do. So, yeah, I think that relationship is so important between a HR manager and manager. Really have to work well together.
Yeah, I love what you said there about scenario planning.
Mm,
Because when you're dealing with emotions, and you'll know this from your work as a coach and as a line manager, but people are unpredictable, and particularly in a redundancy situation, people can go into shock. Emotional come over in terms of anger, maybe frustration, or it can be sadness, it could be tears. You just don't know. You might think you have an idea of how someone might
mm.
react, but in that moment, and that can be very difficult, as you say, if you're just not prepared. I love what you said there about working through some of those scenarios beforehand about how you might handle that. So I guess we may have covered this in what you said there. So what advice would you give to HR teams? So thinking about people out there who are planning these redundancies with their line managers, what advice would you give to them in order to best support their line management teams?
Yeah. So, I mean, line managers, we are looking for HR representatives to hold our hand through this process. There'll be inexperienced managers, first line managers. There'll be experienced first line managers who probably think they know it all. But having a HR manager who brings it all together is just essential. So, yeah, just having those open conversations, exploring the role, the expectations of the first line manager as part of the process. Their role in the meetings, all that upfront planning and preparation will go a long way to making the redundancy process a smoother process, a delivery point of view. I mean, no employee wants to see a clunky, put together a meeting HR manager that has never spoken to a first line manager before. The more you can be smoother with the process, I think it helps with the overall experience that the employees have.
Yeah, so that putting in that effort up front, putting in that time up front, and having, as you said, that partnership approach. And like what you said there about when you're on the receiving end of the news, one of the things that you're looking to the line manager and the HR manager is that they kind of know what they're doing, and
Mm.
that they're going to support you, and that the process, yeah, you might not want to be in the process, but at least the people who are supporting you through it kind of get it and they know what to do. Because that vulnerability that you can feel, and as you'll know from being put at risk, and I've been in a similar situation a couple of times, it makes you feel incredibly vulnerable. So you do look to those people on the other side of the desk to kind of say, well, how can you help me? How can you support me? So if the process itself isn't looking great to start with, then that's not going to put the individual in a great frame of mind. So, and then just sort of thinking about wrapping up, really, I'd love to hear your advice to other line managers handling redundancies, whether it
Mm.
be for the first time or maybe they're relatively experienced. What advice would you give to them?
Oh, I wish I had had some advice before. Yeah. I would say that while sometimes the process meetings themselves can be quite repetitive, especially if you've got larger teams, I think it's important for the line manager and everybody involved in those meetings to treat them with the same importance and respect. Whilst me as a line manager may have heard the HR representative read through a script a few times, the employee themselves haven't heard it before. It's important that they get the respect to be able to hear that message and all the information they need. So I'd also say that from the very first announcement to the very end of the process, just make yourself available to your team members. And don't forget those employees who will be remaining after the restructuring process has concluded. It may be that they may be seeing a colleague or a friend leave the organisation and possibly even being asked to work in a different way to accommodate the restructuring process. Don't underestimate that they're still going through stuff that they need to process to be able to get an understanding of the whole situation, and may feel not great seeing their colleagues and friends leaving the organisation. So be there for them as well.
Yeah, that's often a group of people that can be overlooked. I guess survivors as they're sort of termed. And as that line manager, if you're reducing the teams, there'll be some people left. That kind of not forgetting them and making time for them and noticing what they might be going through as well. So this whole piece around being really visible as a line manager, being accessible and being close to the teams, which isn't just something you do during redundancy exercise, that should be part of leadership as well.
Of course.
Well, Stuart, I've so enjoyed talking to you and hearing your insights. And I'm so grateful that you dropped me that message and said, I'd love to come on your podcast, because literally I was just thinking, wouldn't it be lovely to hear the perspective from a line manager and from someone like you who, everything you've said, it was almost like I'd scripted it. But clearly I hadn't. That was just you.
No.
It was just the way that you come up with it. So I'm hugely grateful. I'm going to put your contact details and things in the show notes if people want to reach out to you, get in touch. I know you do work outside of work as a personal development coach, so people can reach out and check you out on that as well. Yeah, it's just been a really lovely conversation. And although people can't see this, we are recording this in a heat wave, and Stuart's outside in his garden. And I'm in my very hot office, but it's been delightful. Thanks again, Stuart. I've really, really enjoyed it. And I know people are going to get lots out of today's episode.
You're very welcome, and thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to the Redundancy Matters podcast. I hope you found today's episode helpful. It would mean a lot to me if you would follow, rate and review this podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts, as this helps it reach more people who are managing redundancies. Let me know what you thought. And if you have ideas for future episodes, I'd love to hear from you. You can find me on LinkedIn, June Hogan, and get in touch via my website, wildwoodcoaching.co.uk, where you'll also find more resources to help you manage redundancies. I hope you'll join me again soon for the next episode of Redundancy Matters.